Hello lovelies, and welcome to today's video. My name's Alya and I'm really happy that you stopped by. So it's very early in the morning and I'm just getting ready for work, finally going back to work. So very excited. I've just created this very calm and simple but very shiny, because I just was feeling a bit shiny this morning, look for work today. So not too much, very toned down for me. And we're talking about a really interesting topic today: allergies. So if you're interested, please do stick around to see me create this look and learn a little bit more about allergies. I'm really excited about today's topic, guys. It's such a fun thing to learn about for me. I really love discovering how the body works and why certain things happen. That's probably my favorite part of my job, is really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of how things happen to best understand how to treat them and how to, kind of like take advantage, I guess, of the body's biology in order to better the medication or the science or the whatever it might be, the experience of the body's reaction. Sorry about my voice, it's very early in the morning right now. So what is an allergy? I guess that's the biggest question we have to pose. What's an allergy? Is it an illness of some sort? Is it a malfunction of the body of some sort? What are we dealing with here really? If it is a problem, do we really need to stop it? So an allergy is the body's reaction to a kind of trigger. We call them allergen. So as soon as your cells come into contact with an allergen, they create a response. The response is often incorrect of sorts. For example, there will be people who can walk past a tree that's in blossom and be fine. And then there's those who will be allergic to that tree and start sneezing and will have, a runny nose and itchy eyes afterwards, or etc. Have a response. Same thing with, say, nuts. There are plenty of people that can very comfortably eat healthy, beautiful, omega-3 filled nuts. But then there are those who may die if they even come into contact with a nut. So, this is an incorrect response of the body, but it is what it is. And these people need to sort of have treatments in place so that they are able to treat themselves when this happens. So these people who are susceptible to these sort of reactions, they're known as atopic people, because it's genetic tendency, these things. So it's very likely that if one of your parents had hay fever, you probably will, or if there is allergies in the family to, say, nuts, it may repeat themselves. Asthma is another really good example. Allergic skin conditions like dermatitis or eczema, these things do repeat themselves in families and do have a genetic component a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. You can also get 4 different types of allergies, which is why I can comfortably talk about something pretty common like hay fever and something horrible like a nut allergy that can cause death in the same sentence. They're still the same reaction in the body. The difference is its severity, or the type of cells that are involved in that reaction. So the first type 1, is of course anaphylaxis. This is where your tongue and throat swell up, your breathing apparatuses all close over, and of course you are unable to breathe, even with medical assistance, and unfortunately that could spell death. The response to an anaphylactic allergic reaction is obviously much more severe in a medical sense than to, say, hay fever, obviously. You have to respond quickly, you have to respond with the correct treatment very reactively, and you have to administer it very specifically. Unlike hay fever, where you just put up with it, for example. We have to also remember that the body produces a similar response sometimes to, say, a virus. If we have a common cold, for example, a lot of the time similar cells will be, working, because it's just an immune response that we were talking about here. So that's why sometimes when you have hay fever, you feel like you've just had a cold for a few hours until the body works out what pollen you were exposed to and sort of removes it from the system. So sometimes antihistamines will help us, even if it's not an allergen that we're dealing with, they may still reduce the symptoms. So it's a very tricky little grey area there. Type 2 is known as cytotoxic, then you have immunocomplex, and then you have cell-mediated. So just different levels of your immune response, and depending on which type, from 4 to 1 being the most severe, your body will respond accordingly. And obviously the severity of the treatment will have to be adjusted accordingly too. What happens when you have this allergic reaction? Your body produces antibodies, actually, same as it would to a virus, And those antibodies attach themselves to these really, really cool cells, because we have a pretty amazing immune system, called mast cells, like a mast of on a ship. Mast cells are pretty funky because they can produce a really quick response to an allergen, which is important when this is a real response in the body, not an overcompensation response like what happens with allergies. It very quickly can produce histamines. Histamines will cause irritation, they will cause inflammation, they will cause discomfort, swelling, all these sort of things, all to stop the foreign thing from spreading around in the body. Yes, of course, as we've spoken about, this reaction can kill us. It's true, but the whole point of having this response is so that this horrible thing can't get into our body, and it is encased and stopped and thrown out. So in the case of, say, a virus, that's a really great response that we have. But in terms of, say, cut grass, that's a horrible thing that we have to go through, but it's very manageable. So hay fever is known as rhinitis. So rhino, you know, the big animal with a horn, rhinitis refers to swelling or inflammation of the nose. You have sinusitis, which affects the sinuses more. So if you have a really bad congestion through here and here, then it'll be sinusitis. It can also affect the throat, of course, and the eyes. So conjunctivitis, allergic conjunctivitis. And the treatments are very, very similar. Just the suspension or the way you would administer yourself the treatment may vary. Time for a bit of shimmer. The other things that can be, or parts of the body that can be affected, is the bowel, stomach for sure, especially if we're talking about, you know, food allergies, things like that. The lungs and chest, if we're talking about asthma, and of course the skin, which is a very common component for a lot of people, where they can get hives, for example, or some sort of little rashes. I even know people who can get heat rashes. If they're experiencing a bit of an allergic reaction, their skin will respond to even the slightest warmth. They can get like a heat rash. It's just the immune system kind of going wild in that particular moment. It's very, very overreactive. And so many different areas may become affected. Many, many, many different treatments exist of different severities and consequences and side effects and effectivities. You know, things can be very effective and things can be only somewhat effective, but it's still very good to have around. For example, saline. You would think, goodness, what are you going to do with saline if you're having an anaphylactic response to a nut allergy, for example? No. You have to obviously treat the problem accordingly. So if you have a nut allergy, you need to obviously go full hog. If it's life-threatening, you need to use the correct medication. You need to administer it quickly, as I mentioned, of course. But if we're talking about hay fever, having a routine that may involve something very benign, like saline, can actually be highly effective. For example, if you start every day in, say, the springtime, or when you know yourself to be responsive to, say, cut grass or pollens. So for example, let's say in Australia, me personally, my allergies usually start at the end of winter, usually in the coldest months when nothing's blossoming yet, say August. And this can last all the way through to February sometimes, depending on, you know, the weather, wind, wet, dry, what's in season, what's blossoming. It can come and go, all those sort of things. So we're talking about rhinitis or hay fever. These sort of things are very manageable. So if I start every single day with a special saline wash of the sinuses, in Australia, it's the one I particularly use is a system called Flow. It's a little nozzle. You sort of squeeze some special solution up your nose, which is basically saline, but it's got some stuff in it. So it's basically just cooled boiled water with a bit of powder in, and it just flushes out all the pollens out of your sinuses. That way that when you're outside, new pollens come in, the amount and the reaction will be obviously a lot less, and also whatever stagnant stuff is remaining will get flushed out, and your congestion level is much, much improved. So this can be really, really, really helpful if you're dealing with this chronically. If it's not like a once-off thing, or only if it's a really high pollen day that you're responding to. If this is something you respond to on the daily, this is a really great method to very gently, in a very benign way, flush out your sinuses. If you're suffering from chronic rhinitis, or you get a little bit of sort of discharge in the morning in your eyes and it's bothering you, flushing out your sinuses with a very safe, benign solution is a really great way to deal with it. Similar with the eyes, you can absolutely flush your eyes out with saline if they're itchy, or if you wake up with them being really, really sort of congested or having stuff in them. Absolutely go for it. Definitely use a little bit of saline to flush out your eyes. I prefer homemade. I like the idea of using cooled boiled water with salt for the eyes. Sea salt, if you can get your hands on it. It doesn't have to be though. Table salt works fine. You know, and that's fine. It's safe. You're definitely not doing any damage. It's completely benign, so you're not going to be introducing anything or creating any kind of havoc by doing that. It's a great way to flush out, as I mentioned, remaining pollens. That way when you go out and get exposed to new ones, it's not as much. You're not overwhelming the system, and any kind of cells that have started to respond will get a nice cleanse in that moment. But let's talk about the medicines for a moment. We talked about mast cells producing histamines or releasing histamines as a response to a pollen or to an allergen. So that is why we have antihistamines as a form of hay fever treatment. It's probably the most common form of hay fever treatment or basic allergy treatments. In fact, they say that if you have a child that has an allergy, and my child does have a slight allergic reaction to certain foods, or like an IBS type of reaction, irritable bowel syndrome type reaction. So the bowel becomes irritated, and I'm 100% certain, even though it hasn't been proven with medical tests, that he has certain histamine responses as well, because he does have all the same signs, but in his bowel. What you can do is you can have an antihistamine to curb the symptoms. And all you're doing there is you're curbing the symptoms. You're not reducing your reaction to the pollen. The pollen's still there. The cells are still responding to it, but what you're doing is you're reducing the reaction by reducing the amount of histamines that are being released, and therefore the severity of the irritation or the inflammation that they're causing or that they're requiring the body to have. And it's not a great long-term solution, definitely not, but it's definitely fantastic for reducing the severity of your symptoms, of your discomfort, of the irritation. It can make you breathe again. It can make you functional again. And it can definitely let the body and the immune system take a break, take 5 on its response. So it's definitely a fantastic thing that we have in the marketplace. And there are definitely natural ways to have that as well. I highly recommend that you research them, but there are definitely some foods that will help your immune system along, especially leafy greens. Certain leafy greens are fantastic anti-inflammatories. Certain foods encourage you to produce more inflammation than others, and if you're already having a little bit of discomfort, you might want to avoid certain foods. Some people have a really bad response to dairy. For example, if you've had a little bit of dairy and it's also hay fever season, you might have a more severe rhinitis. This is definitely something that happens in people. Caffeine's another one that some people swear it helps them. Some people say it makes them terribly, terribly bad in their response. You know, these are things that are very individualized, because it is, at the end of the day, our individual cells that are responding. One really good one, if you can have it, so if the sugar content is okay for you and you're not fructose intolerant, and you don't otherwise have any sort of allergy to it, honey is actually really, really brilliant, especially for hay fever. If you get a locally produced, small quantity, raw, cold pressed, unfiltered honey, I know that's a really tall order, but it's actually one of the best and most natural ways of collecting honey. So we're talking about some guy in the backyard having some beehives, and will locally just produce small batches, which usually means you have to put your name down to get it, otherwise they'll sell out quickly, thank goodness. Now, where I live, I get from the health food store. I'm really lucky. The health food store stocks on behalf of a gentleman that does this, so it's very easy for me to access. But if you don't have a local seller, and I mean, they don't even take a profit, we're talking about they just do this on his behalf. I come down and say, hey, where's my such and such bees, and they call me when he brings in the next batch. So it's really, really simple. If this doesn't happen, I'm sure that you could Google it. I'm sure that there are bee societies out there which will tell you where the local beehives are, and you could give them a call directly and just pay them for their time, for their care of the bees, and in exchange they'll give you some of their honey, maybe even some honeycomb. Honeycomb can't last forever. The bees will need to make more eventually. So once they're done with their honeycomb, you by all means are able to have it, and it's very, very healthy. And if you're safe to have it, it's really, really good for you. Helps the body. And how does it do that? That's because bees, even though they drink nectar, and and this is the reason why it's important to have a local honey, is they drink the nectar of the flowers you're exposed to. So what they do, it's a bit of like a vaccine. They will bring along some of those pollens on their little feet into the beehive, and it will inevitably come out with the honey, or better still, in the actual honeycomb. But honey is good enough. And if you have just a small amount, I'm talking about like 2 teaspoons or an unfilled tablespoon of the stuff, it doesn't have to be a lot. What you're doing is you're introducing a little bit of those pollens, which aren't even active, they've been sitting there for a while, into your body. And then if you're already allergic to those pollens, your body responds normally to them instead of having this big blowout response. Same thing as a vaccine. You have a small reaction regularly, daily, and your body gets used to it, and the immune system chills out, it calms down, it has a normal response to this allergen, rather than having a ridiculous, flowy, itchy, kind of response. Describing myself here. The other medications that we can use are mast cell inhibitors, which are a little bit different. They actually stop the mast cells from ever producing histamines in the first place, not just reducing the histamines themselves. There's eye drops. Saline eye drops exist, but better still antihistamine eye drops or mast cell inhibitor eye drops. The other body of medicines that exist is steroids, which is a bit of an extreme reaction if it's just a regular daily kind of thing. If it's not particularly severe, I would avoid using steroids. But if you're having a very severe allergic reaction and it's really blocking your function, then of course go ahead and speak to your doctor or medical practitioner about steroids, because they often need to be prescribed. With steroid eye drops, it's a little bit of a dangerous one, because you can have a bad reaction to them. You can have actually a sort of glaucoma happen as a result of using steroids. Not everyone, but it is definitely a real risk. I think something like 1/5 of all steroid users will have a glaucoma response. So it's something you want to handle with care, but definitely under the guise of a doctor. You can definitely try it if you're severe enough. But if you're having a reaction that's really life-threatening, what you need then is what's called an EpiPen. It's called an EpiPen because it's full of adrenaline, which is otherwise known as epinephrine. And what that does is it causes your body to it's the opposite of the reaction that is being caused. So it causes the throat to unblock, the nose to unswell, sinuses to unswell, and for breathing to be possible again. And of course, saline sprays and things like that exist as well, like I mentioned. And the last but not the least by far is allergen immunotherapy. So there are specialists that are able to train your body, similar to the way the honey works, train the body to have a much more calm and much more normal response to the allergen if you are exposed. It doesn't mean you're no longer allergic to this thing. All it means is that your body's response will be much less severe and therefore much more safe, and you don't have to be so concerned. It doesn't mean you can go out and eat a bunch of nuts if you're allergic to nuts. It just means that if somebody's having nuts and they touch you, or it touches your food, or your food was produced in a kitchen where there were nuts, it's no longer life-threatening for you, because your body will have a much more mild response. Okay, my lovelies, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you like and subscribe, and check out Instagram for more fun things. Got my garden up there, really fun things happening there. Got some philanthropy works going up there, so please do check it out to keep in touch. Leave me a comment and let me know if there's any other health or eye related things you'd like me to speak about. I hope you like this look. It's a little bit shiny for work at the end of the day, but I actually really like it, so I hope you do too. Wherever you are around the world, my lovelies, I hope you're having an amazing day, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye.